Hey there, I'm John, though my friends tend to call me Head. I'm a broadcast engineer at WBDK, a CBS affiliate here in Atlanta, Georgia. I've got a fancy graduate degree from MIT in electrical engineering and computer science, plus another one in broadcast technologies. With 22 years of experience under my belt, I've handled some pretty tough roles, and I've been here in Atlanta for the last 5 years. Before this, I worked at various TV stations up and down the East Coast. I'm 46, standing tall at 6 3 inches and weighing about 190 pounds. People say I'm handsome, but I'm no TV star. I've been happily married to Lisa for 22 years, and we have 2 daughters, Michelle and Emily. Michelle is married, and Emily is on the brink of graduating from college. Lisa is about 5'5", weighs around 135 pounds, and has long blonde hair. She's always been sweet, or so I thought. Nowadays, she works as a secretary for our pastor, Reverend James Carter, a job she's had for a year and a half. Last Friday, I decided to surprise Lisa by taking her out for lunch. I parked near the side entrance of the church office because of the rain, hoping to get closer to the door. When I got there, her office was empty, but I went in anyway. While waiting, I overheard her talking to Pastor James in his office. She was excited about Monday night and mentioned how great it was that I worked the Monday night football games, giving them time together. She also asked about a reservation at the L Inn. James assured her everything was set and said, "I've booked the Whirlpool suite again. Come over here and let me show it to you right now." Then I heard the rustling of clothes and Lisa's moans. I was floored, feeling sick to my stomach as anger surged through me. I knew I had to leave before I did something I'd regret. Listening to them any longer was unbearable. I wanted to storm in and confront them, but I hesitated, fearing I'd lose control and get physical. I was sure I'd end up attacking both of them, but I didn't want to deal with the fallout of my actions, so I forced myself to leave. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I wanted to explode, but I walked away instead. I'm almost certain they didn't see me or know I was there. The church has security cameras at the main entrances, but I had used the side door and avoided detection. I was so shaken that I knew I couldn't focus on work for the rest of the day. I called in sick and headed home to think things over. Lisa wouldn't be back until after 4 p.m., giving me plenty of time to process everything. It was clear that Lisa was cheating with Pastor James, and I decided I couldn't continue seeing him as my pastor. I needed to find out the full scope of their affair, how long it had been going on, and what led to it. Some people might not want to dig into these details, but I needed to know. I wanted to understand why this happened in what I thought was a great marriage. Apparently, Lisa didn't see it that way. She wasn't the sweet person I believed her to be, and I was determined to find out the truth. I wasn't going to be weak. I was resolved to get to the bottom of this and make sure they both faced the consequences. When I got home, I made a pot of coffee and sat on the patio, hoping the fresh air would help me think clearly. I needed to make sense of everything that had just happened. I won't lie, I shed some tears that afternoon. I know I don't own Lisa or her body, but it hurt deeply to think she was with another man, especially after she vowed to be mine on our wedding day. Some people might not take those vows seriously, but I did, and I thought she did too. Situations like this make you question your values and whether you've been naive to believe in faithfulness and love. The most damaging part of a cheating partner isn't just the physical act. It's the loss of trust in them and everything they do or say. It's like you thought they always had your back, but now you realize they don't, leaving you feeling exposed and scared. Despite my size, I felt vulnerable and frightened. A cheating spouse can really mess with your emotions. As I sat there, struggling to stay calm and logical so I could process everything, I realized there were things I had questioned in the past, but dismissed because I trusted Lisa. These were small things that seemed insignificant at the time, but now felt like a heavy lump in my stomach as I connected the dots. How could I have been so foolish? It was trust, plain and simple. I trusted her, and now that trust was shattered. I needed cold, hard facts. I wanted to know why this happened, how long it had been going on, where it occurred, and who else might be involved. My trust was gone, and I was determined to get answers. By 3 p.m., I knew I couldn't face Lisa yet without giving away my feelings, so I decided to leave the house before she got back. I drove into town, stopped by the station to grab a few things for the next couple of days, and asked my boss for some time off, citing personal issues. He agreed, so I headed to David's to hang out. Around 5 p.m., I called Lisa to let her know I'd be out for a while and wouldn't be home for dinner. She seemed irritated with me and mentioned how she was feeling particularly affectionate tonight and that I would have been in for a treat. However, my plans were already set, so I told her to stay in the mood for me, assuring her I'd make it worth her while when I got back. She snapped back, "Don't count on it, mister. If you think you can treat me like that, you won't be getting anything for a while." Inwardly, I thought to myself that this was exactly what I wanted. I stumbled home around 10:30 p.m., feeling quite tipsy, but not too drunk to notice the bedroom door was shut and locked. I grinned at the sight and knocked to see if she was awake, though I doubted it. I yelled, "Fine, if this is how you want to play, then don't expect any affection from me. Just deal with it." With that, I headed to the spare bedroom. The next morning, I got up and found her sitting at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee. Her mood soured even more when I walked in. If I hadn't known she was a cheating wife, I certainly would have sensed something was off. I smiled and said, "No need to get up and make breakfast, honey. I'll grab something on my way to the golf course." I then headed out to the garage, loaded my golf clubs into the trunk, and drove off. Not long after, my phone rang, and I saw it was her calling, so I ignored it. A few minutes later, I received a voicemail notification. I listened to it, and it was an angry message demanding how I could do this to her and insisting I come back immediately. The truth was, I had no intention of actually going golfing. I used that as an excuse to buy myself some time to handle what I needed to. My destination was my former church. The last thing I wanted was to hear James preach again. It was still early when I arrived, so I knew the place would likely be empty, and I was right. I entered the building using the key Lisa had for work. I went straight to the offices, intent on placing remote micro cameras and mini microphones in both her office and James's. It didn't take long to set everything up, and I hid the transmitter behind some old hymnals in the supply closet across the hall. I had the receiver in my trunk, wired into my car's electrical system, so I could monitor their conversations and activities whenever they were in their offices. While I didn't expect them to do much at the church, I was confident I would gather valuable information by observing them for a few days. Once I confirmed everything was working properly, I rummaged through Lisa's desk but found nothing significant. However, I did notice a large asterisk on her calendar for Monday, which matched what I overheard on Friday. I planned to be ready for whatever might happen that day. Next, I searched James's office. I didn't find anything incriminating at first, but just as I was about to give up, inspiration struck. It was ironic considering I was in a church, but I had a thought to check the filing cabinets for church expense receipts. Sure enough, I found a file containing several receipts from the L Inn in Roswell. Some dated back to late 2019, and a few were from the spring of 2020. Knowing I was pushing my luck by staying too long, I quickly made copies of the receipts and then put everything back in place. My next move was to head to the golf course and park in my usual spot. I made my way to the clubhouse and headed for the bar, wanting to ensure a few people saw me there. I found a table in the back and ordered a Sprite, spending a couple of hours there. During that time, I carefully examined the receipts. I discovered the two from late 2019 were both for Mondays, and the two from spring 2020 coincided with dates when I attended conferences at CBS headquarters in New York. What enraged me most was that James had the nerve to charge those motel rooms to the church, disguising them as conference room rentals for meetings. He was renting rooms with my wife, and I had unknowingly footed the bill while contributing to the church. From now on, there would be no more donations from me. Their reckoning was near, and I just needed a bit more evidence to seal their fate. I was certain this affair had been ongoing for nearly a year, if not longer, which aligned with the hints I had picked up earlier. My hunch was that James had been involved with her even before she started working for him. She had a decent job as a receptionist at Telfer Corporation, but eagerly accepted the opportunity to work for the church, saying, "Honey, it's so close to home, and I'll be working for the church. What could be better than that? Plus, the pay is almost as good as what I was making at Telfor. How can I pass this up?" It sounded great. Closer to home, church employment, and nearly the same pay. However, it was clear she was more interested in the extra perks. I couldn't believe how blind I had been. It filled me with anger, but it also sickened me to think my loving wife could betray me like this. I was determined to make them pay for their actions. I decided it was time to do some more investigating. I went out to my car and connected my iPod to the receiver frequency. After scrolling through a few minutes of data, I saw James enter his office. He picked up his phone and made a call. I regretted not having bugged his phone, but there was nothing I could do about it now. I had to settle for hearing one side of the conversation. "Yes, Lisa, I'm at the church. I came right after you called me. Why don't you tell me what's bothering you?" he said. "Has he ever done this before?" "I see. What do you think set him off then?" he asked. "Do you think he's suspicious of anything, Lisa?" With a laugh, he continued, "All right, well, you can get back at him on Monday night." After hanging up, he sat there and thought. Just as I was about to shut down the transmission, he mumbled something, almost inaudible, but I managed to capture it. I made sure to save that soundbite, knowing it could be crucial later. After shutting everything down, I headed back home. Since it was a bit chilly, I decided to mow the lawn and tackle some basement chores. When I walked into the house, the tension was palpable, though she barely acknowledged me. At dinner, I ignored her, while she just stared at me, trying to break the silence. Eventually, she asked what had been bothering me and why I had been acting so strangely. I reminded her that she had locked me out of our bedroom the previous night and that I rarely went out with friends. I pointed out that the one time I did, she got upset and made threats, so this situation was her doing, not mine. Frustrated, she spat out an expletive, which I noted was far from the behavior expected of a devout Christian. Her reaction was full of guilt, which she tried to hide but couldn't. She eventually regained her composure and left the table. I thought to myself that when the truth came out, she wouldn't handle it well. Later that evening, she entered the family room where I was watching TV, her eyes slightly red, indicating she might have been crying. The rest of the evening was uneventful. When I was ready for bed, I walked down the hallway to the spare bedroom and settled in. A few minutes later, she stood in the doorway. "What do you want?" I asked. "Aren't you coming to bed?" she inquired. "Nope," I replied. "You've made it clear that there won't be any intimacy for a while, so I might as well get a good night's sleep alone in here." She left the room in tears, but honestly, I didn't care. On Sunday morning, she woke me up at 8 a.m., dressed for church, and invited me to join her. I declined, saying I had no intention of going. She left the room with a look that suggested she was starting to grasp the situation. Later, she left the house, and we barely spoke throughout the day, each staying in our own spaces. Monday morning, I left the house without seeing her. She called, her voice choked with tears, apologizing and expressing her love. I told her we'd talk that evening and hung up. Then I contacted my boss, letting him know I'd be taking the day off, but confirming I'd cover the Monday night football game. He was fine with that and asked how things were going. I said they were proceeding as expected. My next stop was the L Inn in Roswell. I walked into the motel lobby, trying to look like any other maintenance guy on the job. The clerk, a young guy named Mark, was more engrossed in his phone than in what was happening around him. Clipboard in hand, I approached him. "Got a service call for the Whirlpool suite," I said, tapping on a fake work order about the AC making noise. "You know how it is with this heat?" Mark glanced at the clipboard, frowning slightly. I kept my face serious and professional. "Which room?" he asked, sounding confused. I gave him the suite number, and for a moment, I thought he'd catch on. But he just nodded, handed me the key card, and said, "Make it quick." I was in the room quickly, setting down my tool bag. Instead of wrenches and gauges, I pulled out high-tech gear. Mics, cameras, the works. I was playing the maintenance guy, but I was really setting up a sting operation to catch my wife. Installation was quick and discreet. I hid the devices so well they were practically invisible. I was out of the room just as fast, nodding at Mark on my way out. "All set. No more noise from that AC," I told him. He barely looked up from his screen. I left feeling like James Bond. Mark was none the wiser, and I was one step closer to uncovering the truth. With time to spare, I decided to handle some other tasks. I went to our bank and got cashier's checks for half the funds from our checking and savings accounts. Then I canceled our joint credit cards. Next, I called my broker and set up a meeting to adjust our investment accounts. I also contacted my attorney to discuss the divorce and other legal matters, scheduling an appointment for the afternoon. I drove to Planters National Bank in Marietta, Georgia, and opened new accounts in my name only, depositing the cashier's checks. I grabbed a quick lunch in Marietta, though I had little appetite. After lunch, I met with my broker to go over the changes to our investment portfolio, dividing everything equally without selling assets to avoid tax issues. I took the paperwork with me. Then I met with my attorney to review the divorce papers. I suggested a no-fault divorce with an equal split of assets if she signed immediately. If she refused, I had him include a clause for filing based on adultery. I was confident she'd sign right away. With everything set, all I had left to do was grab dinner and head to the station for the Monday Night Football broadcast. Leaving my attorney's office, I turned on my phone and saw messages from Lisa. She was worried about my recent behavior, asking me to come home before the game. She professed her love and said it tore her apart to see me like this. Despite knowing her plans and my awareness of them, she still sent those messages. It made me question my judgment, wondering how I could have been so foolish to love and trust her. I decided that the only way to possibly salvage my marriage was to see if she would show up at the motel tonight. Her decision would clearly indicate whether she cared enough to try to save our relationship, acknowledging its fragile state. At 8 p.m., I activated the broadcast system in fully automated mode, and Monday Night Football began. I set up the system to monitor the feed from the motel room. At exactly 8:15, James walked in and made a call, saying, "Hey baby, I'm here, come over as soon as you can." Lisa replied, "Okay honey, I'll be there in a few minutes." After the call ended, he muttered a few more words that I needed to listen to again later to confirm. My marriage seemed to be falling apart, and while I didn't think she would end it, the pain was still intense. This whole ordeal only strengthened my resolve to make them face the consequences. I pulled out my list of contacts and started making calls, which took nearly half an hour. By then, Lisa had arrived at the motel, so I returned to monitoring the video and audio feed. She said, "Oh God, Jamesby, being with you excites me so much. I really treasure these nights together," she confided. Jamesby invited her closer, saying, "Tonight, darling, I'll fulfill all your desires." She responded, "I love it when you talk like that, Jamesby." My heart sank, and a wave of nausea hit me. Here were a pastor and a church secretary, and my once sweet wife, descending into a level of depravity I couldn't fathom. Over the next moments, I saw just how twisted they were. They deserved whatever consequences were coming to them. She lay down on the bed, and I couldn't bear to describe what happened next. The woman who had once been the love of my life was now a stranger. When James finished, I knew our future together was irreparably broken. Despite the agony, my anger kept me focused. If they had seen me then, they would have cowered in fear. At that point, I had lost much of my humanity. My only goal was to bring them to justice. After enduring their actions for 45 minutes, I had seen enough. It was halftime during the football game, and it was time for the halftime show. I switched the system to live assist mode and started playing the recording of James and Lisa from the beginning. Within minutes, the phone started ringing nonstop. I ignored all the calls and took out my cell phone. I dialed Lisa's number, and the ringing echoed through the monitors. She looked at her phone and said, "It's Head. I'm not answering this time. Let's see how he likes it." I hung up and called again. "I suppose I should answer it," she finally said, retrieving her phone from her purse. Lisa answered with a venomous tone when I greeted her, saying, "Hello," curious about her whereabouts and plans. I asked where she was and what she was doing. She claimed she had gone shopping since I hadn't called her earlier and planned to grab some food before heading home. In a sarcastic tone, I asked if she was shopping right now, and she confirmed, mentioning she intended to spend a lot of money. Unable to hold back, I sarcastically thanked her for being such a wonderful wife. She snapped back, telling me not to speak to her that way and expressing her confusion about my recent behavior before hanging up. There she was, using that tone again. "No, Lisa, the real issue was James in her motel room." As their activities wound down and she took one last shot, I contemplated interrupting it, knowing she wouldn't answer her cell phone again. I called the motel number. "Mark, it's Head. Aren't you watching Monday Night Football?" "No, you should be. Could you ring the Whirlpool Suite for me?" After just 2 rings, James picked up. "Hi, James, can I speak to Lisa?" Once again, she came on the line, questioning why I was calling. "Well, Lisa, it's like this. I know you've been unfaithful, and I'm well aware of your location and activities. I plan to file for divorce, and you'll be without a place to stay. James might face some consequences too. Confused, she asked, "What are you talking about, Head? I can't understand your recent behavior. What's going on with you?" I simply replied, "Lisa, the charade is over. I suggest you turn on Monday Night Football and enjoy the halftime show. Goodbye." I watched on the live monitor as she went to the TV and tuned into MNF. "Oh my God, no!" she screamed as she watched the streaming video of herself and James. Due to a time delay in the live feed, she saw a substantial portion of what the entire Atlanta area had already seen. Her response was to repeat, "Oh no," as she quickly got dressed and fled the room. James was equally frantic, cursing as he tried to leave. "I will kick that son of a b... I will kick him," he muttered, unaware his words were being recorded. Once they left the room, I turned off the monitors and let the video stream run for one more minute, then switched off the live assist mode and returned the system to full automation. I retrieved the tape and left the broadcast booth, knowing it might be my last visit. I grabbed a few personal items from my desk. Final update: I spent the rest of the night at David's, and yes, my halftime performance was the hot topic at the bar. After the game, I took a cab home. When I arrived, I found Lisa sitting alone in the darkened living room. The phone had been disconnected, and she had clearly been crying uncontrollably. Her tears didn't move me. To me, it was over. She sobbed, "How could you do this to me, Head? After all these years together, how could you?" I responded firmly, "No, Lisa. The real question is, how could you do this to me? I'm drunk and going to bed. We'll talk tomorrow." She remained motionless as I left the room and headed to the spare bedroom. The next morning, I woke up with a throbbing headache, only to find Lisa still on the sofa, her eyes sunken with dark circles, clearly showing she hadn't slept at all. I couldn't care less. She had brought this on herself. I casually placed the phone back on the hook, and it immediately started ringing. For the next hour and a half, I took calls from family members, her parents, friends, church acquaintances, my former boss, and both of my daughters. They were all deeply upset by what they had seen, and nothing I said could make them feel better. I knew it was hard for them to witness such explicit content, but they were adults and would eventually get over it. I also got a call from Mrs. James, asking if I had kept a tape of the entire incident. I assured her that I had a secure copy and could provide it if needed. It was clear that everyone I had contacted had watched the Monday Night Football halftime show and had strong opinions. Some were angry about the explicit nature of it, while others, like Lisa's parents, thought exposing her was terrible. However, most people were sympathetic and understood my side. It was a tough situation, but it was the price I had to pay for my actions. Lisa remained on the sofa, crying throughout the morning. Eventually, I took the phone off the hook again and went to make some coffee. When I came back, I handed her a cup along with the divorce papers and investment documents she needed to sign. "Lisa," I said, "I'm filing for divorce after discovering your affair and seeing what I did last night. It's clear you've been cheating on me for at least a year, if not longer. There's no way I can stay in this marriage." I showed her the papers. "These are the divorce documents. If you look at them, you'll see I'm asking for a no-fault divorce and an equal division of our assets. To proceed, you must sign both the divorce agreement and the agreement for splitting our investments right now. There will be no negotiations or changes to these documents. They are completely fair to you." I continued, "You have until 5 p.m. today to consult with an attorney and confirm that my offer is fair. After that, the deal is off the table, and I'll file for divorce on the grounds of adultery. I'll seek a property distribution based on our individual contributions, with mine being significantly greater than yours, and our respective incomes. Basically, I'll go after everything I can. This is the best deal you'll get, so think about it seriously. It would be unwise to contest a divorce based on adultery when everyone in Atlanta knows the truth. Everyone knows you've been unfaithful. This is what you wanted, as I overheard you tell James. Now everyone knows it. Take the deal, Lisa." Desperately, she pleaded, "Head, I love you and want to save our marriage. Can't we try to work this out?" I responded firmly, "That may be true, Lisa, but it doesn't matter. Love isn't enough anymore. Our marriage ended when you chose him over me. Whether you believe it or not, that decision was made when you started your affair with him. Now I suggest you freshen up and consult with an attorney. Time is running out." Later that afternoon, she returned with the papers. "My attorney recommends that I sign these papers, Head. He believes your offer is fair given the circumstances and thinks I should take this settlement, she said. Head, can we talk? Can you listen to me and maybe consider forgiveness and working to save our marriage? I agreed to sit down and listen because I genuinely wanted to understand why she did what she did. I also wanted to know if this was the first time it had happened in our marriage. We sat at the kitchen table and she began to explain everything. She confessed that there had been no other affairs before this one. It started shortly before she began working for James. She admitted she didn't fully understand why, as she had been happy with me, but something about James drew her in. She mentioned his charismatic personality and how he made her feel loved. Here was Lisa, acting like someone who says, "my bad," after making a huge mistake in a marriage. She was saying sorry a lot, trying to fix her mistake with tears and a sad face. It was like she thought feeling bad would make everything okay, even after breaking her promises. It was like when a dog chews up your favorite shoes and then looks cute, thinking you won't be mad. Tough luck, Lisa. Life isn't that simple, and saying sorry doesn't make everything right. Just feeling sorry wasn't enough now. I acknowledged James's charisma but shattered her perception by playing back 2 sound clips I had saved. The first was James muttering on the first day, "That idiot better make sure her husband doesn't find out about our affair." The second clip was from the room just before she arrived. "I'm going to use her tonight. Tomorrow, if she causes any trouble, I'll threaten to tell Head. That should keep her in line. I can't risk her husband discovering our affair and exposing everything." James's words played on repeat in my head. I turned to Lisa and said, "So not only did you destroy our marriage, but you were wrong about James's feelings for you. He was using you." I continued, "Lisa, there are 2 reasons why we can't stay married. First, you broke our vows, and I can't live with that betrayal. Second, even if I wanted to, our marriage could never be the same. I could never make you happy after this, and no matter how much love there might have been, it's not enough to fix the damage you've caused." She just sat there crying, knowing that everything I said was true. In the end, she signed both sets of papers. I informed her of my decision to move out and give her time to find a new place to live. I didn't think she could afford the house on her own, and honestly, I didn't want to stay there either. Our agreement stipulated that the house would be sold, with the profit split evenly, just like our other assets. Besides, the house held too many memories that I wanted to leave behind. I gathered the paperwork and bags I'd packed the day before and left the house. I headed to my broker's office to drop off the documents and then checked into a hotel for the night. The following morning, I had an appointment with my attorney. We discussed the divorce papers, and he agreed to file them with the Superior Court of our county that same day. During our meeting, we also talked about my situation at the radio station and with the FCC. My attorney explained that the FCC had the authority to issue civil fines, revoke broadcasting licenses, or deny renewal applications. Furthermore, those found guilty of violating these regulations in federal court could face criminal fines and up to 2 years in prison. Given the circumstances, my attorney believed that jail time was unlikely, but substantial fines, and the end of my broadcasting career were inevitable. I would have to find a new line of work. In just a matter of days, the consequences of my actions became painfully clear. I was served with legal notices from the FCC and had to prepare for several days in court to defend myself. I won't bore you with the intricate details of the case, but suffice it to say that the fine imposed on me amounted to nearly a year's worth of my salary, depleting my savings account. Worse, my broadcasting license was revoked, and I was prohibited from working in my field for the next 2 years. However, there was a silver lining. TT had watched Monday Night Football, and despite the illegality and vindictiveness of my actions, showed me compassion. He offered me a job with responsibilities that complied with the FCC's restrictions. It seemed he had experienced his own share of troubles in his recent divorce, particularly at the hands of Charles's daughter and Thomas's sister, which may have softened his stance toward me. I suppose I had one thing to thank HJ for in the end. James confronted me once at David's. He seemed ready to throw a punch, but I managed to grab one of his arms tightly. "Listen, James, I don't ever want to hear from you again. Is that clear?" I stated firmly. He grumbled, "Fine with me." I felt like giving him one final warning. "James, I have an audio recording of you making threats against me. If I take that to the police, I believe I have every right to obtain a restraining order against you and possibly press assault charges. With the evidence on hand, you could end up serving time in prison. Is that what you want? He shook his head in disagreement. I added, well then, I suppose this will be our last interaction. James is no longer a pastor. He lost his job with the church, and the denomination revoked his license and nullified his ordination. The last I heard, he was working at a city travel agency. His wife divorced him on grounds of adultery and received a substantial settlement. As for me, I'm moving forward with my life. It's not perfect, but I'm finding ways to be happy. I've dated a few women over the past several months, but haven't gotten into a serious relationship. When the right woman comes along, I'll marry her. I know it's just a matter of time, and I'm willing to invest the effort to find the right person for me. I occasionally run into Lisa. We both attended Emily's college graduation and the baptism of Michelle's first baby. I was polite, but made it clear that I had no interest in a friendship or any kind of relationship with her. It was evident to me that she wasn't happy. She was emotionally suffering from our breakup and regretted her actions. However, the issue wasn't her regret, but her betrayal of me and our marriage. If I were a different person, maybe I could have forgiven her, but my values are quite inflexible, and there wasn't much room for compromise. She will have to live the rest of her life knowing that what she sacrificed for her affair with James was me and our life together. I was just an ordinary man who loved her deeply, but she chose to discard it all. Yes, she let go of me, and regrettably for her, she also forfeited any semblance of respectability. Anyone who witnessed her infamous performance during the Monday Night Football halftime show knows that she is an unfaithful wife. Rumors suggest that she receives numerous date offers, but to her credit, she has declined them all. It's not a very fulfilling way to live life, but I didn't do this to her. She brought it upon herself.